What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of the Lombard Trucking Show. We're back again with episode 95. Thank you all once again for joining me. Real quick, just want to touch on a piece of breaking news that crossed my desk today. Thanks to Rachel Premack, editorial director over at FreightWaves, who shared this article on LinkedIn. This is something I've been manifesting on this show for some time. I've said it time and time again that all it would take is a small number of drivers at a mega carrier to change the whole system. And Werner our friends over at Werner, the people who have been known to fraudulently give out CDLs, the people whose CEO filmed a video last year for Driver Appreciation Week in front of his private jet. All he was missing was lighting the cigar with a flaming $100 bill. Werner acquired a company last year called ECM out of New Jersey. And what they didn't do is any due diligence on who this company was. And they had no clue about the workplace conditions or anything about the drivers there or their employees or anything like that. And then all of a sudden, a small group of employees, less than 30, had voted to unionize, which their management was alerted immediately. And it, began saying, we want another chance at this. We need another chance. Their chance is when they bought the company. But I'm gonna pause it there to go see my full reaction. I posted a video and a reel on TikTok. Feel free to go check it out. I use some of my casual, candid humor. Reason why we're filming this episode is because I got an awesome guest I wanted to bring on here, a young driver. I feel like I've got struck by lightning twice with this guest I'm about to bring on, because I just had on Laura, the tiny bull hauler, 24-year-old, young Generation Z driver who's hauling cattle, we don't see a lot of the young people entering this industry. But what's rare is their background, is that Laura herself didn't have the high-speed internet growing up, kind of lived a childhood more similar to somebody who grew up in the 80s and 90s. And we've got a similar guest coming on the show today. He's a young gentleman, 22 years old, has a family, and he's passionate about the trucking industry. He showed up on my For You page talking about lumpers. And, I'm going to bring up a joke that me and the Please Advise crew have come up with, and we're going to touch on it later in the episode. But it's just, to me, I love seeing when a young driver shows an interest into the macro parts of the supply chain industry. He discovered what lumpers were, and now he's thirsty for more information. I was like, dude, you got to come on the show. I want to hear your story. So without any further delay, I'm bringing him on the show right now. Brett, Mr. Xbox Baker. Is that right?
All right. Yes, sir. That's my nickname. Got it in CDL school, and I'll touch on that a little later.
Oh, awesome, man. So where are you at right now?
I'm in Roscoe, Illinois, just south of the Wisconsin line on 90.
Nice. Yes, I know exactly where you're at. You're just the Wisconsin-Illinois border. You're at a Love's, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you got free showers yet?
Yes, the company that I'm with right now, GP Transco, they have a deal with Lowe's where we get all of our fuel here, and in exchange, all the drivers have that diamond status on the Love's app. So I get unlimited free showers and drinks.
Okay, good. As long as that's taken care of, because sometimes that could be a struggle for a new company driver. A newer company driver, so I can feel on that, man. But
in the beginning of my career, I definitely struggled with that. I mean, $15, I can't afford that every night,
Yeah, I know. In TA, may they burn in hell. I have a lot of disdain for what they do. They want to charge you for the Wi-Fi. They want to charge you. Sometimes it's $18 at a shower at a TA, depending on where you're at. It's pretty out of hand. But dude, Brett, I want to thank you for coming on the show. So what's your story, man? Where are you from?
Yeah, man, I grew up in a town called Castleberry in Florida. It's kind of a suburb of Orlando. Kind of where I grew up was weird. It was the border of three cities: Maitland, Castleberry, Winter Park. It was a weird area. We called it Castleberry. Address was in Maitland. Winter Park was a footstep across the street. But really, pretty standard suburban upbringing. We grew up in an apartment complex, and my sister, she's got 9 years on me. She moved away and went to Alaska with her husband. So I grew up most of my life as a only child, and I really didn't have any truckers in my life that I knew. I don't have my family background, with the exception of my parents, is mainly military. Both of my grandfathers on my mom and my dad's side were both in the Army. My grandfather on my dad's side, he was a colonel. He was in World War II on Normandy Beach the second day, Vietnam, Korea. I mean, you name it, he was probably there. and he was in the Pentagon on September 11, 2001.
This is your
And
grandfather.
yeah, it was my grandfather on my dad's side.
Holy
So,
shit.
and all this to say, trucking isn't in my blood. It never was. The only other trucker in my family is a distant cousin, and he drives for TMC. He's been with them 5 years now as a trainer. But anyway, moving back, I went through school. I spent 2 years at a brick and mortar high school called Crooms Academy of Information Technology in Sanford, Florida, and got kicked out of there because I was slacking off, not doing my homework, and they kicked me out. I had to maintain a certain GPA, and I didn't. So I did my last 2 years of high school in virtual school, Seminole County Virtual School, and that was a good fit for me because I could work at my own pace and not really have to be bothered with all the drama that comes with high school. Um, I didn't really have a whole lot of hobbies. I played video games and helped my dad work on his car every now and then. Not really super athletic guy, and thankfully I never let myself get out of shape. I'm not fat, not anything like that, but not super athletic either. Once I got out of high school, I was pretty lazy. I think any 17, 18-year-old kid, at least nowadays for my generation, is going to be pretty lazy right after they get out of high school or if they drop out or whatever. And it took me a little while before I got a job. But at 18, I got a job working for a construction company on a punch-out crew. And that lasted for about 6 days before I called it quits on that.
Really?
I mean,
Why is that?
well, you see, 18-year-old Brett hadn't discovered the concept of sunscreen, and it was the Florida summer. And
Oh,
by
shit.
my third day, I came home. I was all blistered up in here. It was horrible, man. So on my 6th day, I was like, "Listen, guys, I'm not coming back. I'm done." And I kind of slacked off for a few months. And one morning, my mom, I'll never forget it. She woke me up. She said, "Get out of this house and don't come back until you have a job." So I was like, "Okay." I kicked my ass into gear. I didn't have a car at the time, or yeah, they hadn't given me the car yet. But I went to Walmart. I had a Walmart right around the corner from where I live. So I went over there. I got an interview and went back home and got ready for that. And I kept my Walmart job for a year and about 3 months. And after that, I left without notice, like any dumb 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid does. And before I left Walmart, I ended my first long-term relationship that I had since 10th grade. And I actually met my wife that I'm now married to at Walmart right after I ended my first long-term relationship.
Is this in
Uh,
like the produce aisle, like movie style? You saw her like picking up saw her
no, she
massaging a head of lettuce or something?
what's funny is I started out on the stock team, doing second shift stocking, and then I moved over to sporting goods where I sold ammunition and that kind of stuff. And she worked up front in asset protection, and she's also got I want to say 5 years on me. She's 5 years older than I am. I'm 22. She's 27. So I mean, take that as you will. But we hit it off right from the beginning. She's from Venezuela, and she's one of the most fantastic women I've ever met. And I couldn't have picked a better wife. But really, I bounced between jobs after Walmart. I worked at U-Haul. I worked at a company called True Green. I don't know if you heard of them. There's some kind of lawn care business. I worked there as a door-to-door salesman. Not for me. Um, and then I finally got my security license because I had grand ambitions of being a cop. That was my dream. That was what I was driven to do. I wanted to be a cop. Um, and like I was telling you earlier today, I was about this close from joining the Florida Army National Guard, but I couldn't bring myself to pee in front of other people, and they kicked me out of processing.
That takes a lot of guts to admit, especially on a show. I'll give it to you right there. Your integrity is impeccable because
Well,
there was a kid from my boot camp platoon who got dropped because he pissed his pants like when we were standing online.
yeah.
And I'm sure he probably doesn't tell anybody that.
Well, I don't have any shame about it. I mean, I'm not ashamed of it. It's something that's built me up to the person I am today. And ultimately, it was a blessing in disguise because I was getting in over my head into a job I didn't understand.
Mhm.
And
And
I didn't understand the full scope of it.
And to be honest, I mean, it is when you think about it, when you actually take a step back, because I've been to Steeler games, and if you've been to a Yale football game, anybody from Connecticut listening, you piss in the trough. They have a trough. They don't even have urinals, and it's just, and I get it, but like we don't really shit in front of each other either, so it's
Yeah.
like it's not that weird to think about actually when you step outside. We don't look at each other when we're taking a dump.
Hmm.
but yet we will piss next to each other. That's just
I've,
a
ne-
random thought I had.
I've never been able to do it, man. I mean, even all these years later, that was 2019, and it's 2023 now. I still can't bring myself to do it. I gotta use a stall, and I'm not ashamed of it. It's just how I am. It's something. It's a physiological response. It's not just I'm a bitch.
Yeah, no, you need to be in the zone, auto zone. I get it,
Right,
man.
right. So after that, so I had grand ambitions of being a cop, and I was working security at this power plant in Orlando. Not anything fancy like nuclear. It was a coal fire plant. And I got to talking. At this point, let's back up a little while. I got the security job in April of 2021. I was 20 years old, born in February of '01. And in February of 2021, no, it was March of February 2021, we found out that my then girlfriend was pregnant with our daughter. And I was back to my old ways of being just a lazy asshole. And you know, that kind of kicked my ass into gear and said, okay, we're either going to sink or swim here, and I don't plan on sinking. So I took my security license, I went and got this job, and I was there for 8 or 9 months. Um, and I got to talking to some local drivers from. Yeah, have you seen Keenan Advantage Group around CAG?
Yeah. I got CAG's a big outfit because I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure they're associated with Aqua Logistics. Because I have a friend, another guest who's been on the show. He drives for Aqua, and I believe that they're affiliated with CAG. I know them well.
yeah. So I was talking to some of their local drivers. They ran a local non-hazmat account directly to that power plant from different wastewater treatment plants around the state. They were home every night. Pay sounded good, so I had every one of their drivers assuring me like, "Hey, man, it's not an issue. Even if you're under 21, you're going to be staying in the state, so it's a non-issue." And I didn't have any experience. They said that wouldn't be an issue either because they could get me in. Yada yada yada. It was a typical BS. So I quit my security job, put in my notice, and we instead of getting some kind of high interest loan, my wife, uh, th- at that point she was just about to burst. Probably not the wisest of decisions in hindsight, but it's always 2020, right? Um, anyway, we went to I shopped around a little bit before I left the security job to see what CDL schools were good in my area, and I found Truck Driver Institute in Sanford, Florida. TDI. They have a bunch of places all over the nation. I think they're based in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, not far from where I live now. Um, so I went there, and that was before I went there in November of 2021, just before the regulations came in February of 2022. And that was you're pretty
To,
basic. Yeah,
Not to cut you off, to reiterate, there was new regulations that the FMCSA put in place to acquire your CDL. I just want to remind listeners, we kind of discussed this with Justin
yeah.
Martin when he previously came on the show. They changed it. Do you know what those new requirements are off the top of your head? They just changed the hours, correct?
Yeah, I don't know all of them off the top of my head. I know they changed the amount of hours, so it made the course longer.
Okay.
You have required
Yeah.
hours, and I want to say it basically forced them to make the program more expensive because they had to do more training.
Yeah, that's the issue with that some politicians took with it to try to,
Yeah,
because we were talking about it because this one congressman from Virginia was trying to say that it's a bad thing, but really there, to say that more training is a bad thing isn't good. It being more money is
yeah.
definitely, I'd say probably a little bit
That
more
was
of an argumentative point, but you got in before that happened.
that was Bill Good with the bad bill, right? Or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I remember that episode. I was listening to that this morning.
I
Um,
appreciate that.
yeah, I only got through like half of that episode before I had to switch to something else. But anyway, so yeah, I got in before February 2022, and it was a 3-week program. It was pretty straightforward. Even though they weren't required to give me all of the advanced training, they gave me everything most of what I needed to get ready for the road. It was I was listening to your second episode where you explained the process. It was very similar to mine,
Mhm.
where I didn't get my permit beforehand, so our first 2 days were nothing but studying for those 3 tests, for the air brake, for the combination, and for the general knowledge. Um, I think it was 3. Yeah, it was 3 tests. And on Wednesday they sent us over to the DMV to take the test and get the permit, and we came back on Thursday and started doing maneuvers in the yard. At least those of us who got the permit. We had 2 or 3 drop out because they didn't get their permit or they couldn't pass a piss test or whatever. Um, so it was your basic maneuvers. Florida didn't, on the regular driving test and the CDL test, Florida doesn't require parallel parking. So the
Oh,
three
real,
maneuver,
really?
yeah, yeah. Even though you go into downtown Orlando or Miami or wherever, you're going to be parallel parking in a car or a truck. And so they had us do the 90-degree alley back. They had us do the offset and the straight back,
Hmm.
and that's what they tested us on. And they also did the pre-trip. I remember in your podcast, you were talking about how they only made you do a certain part of the trucker trailer combination in addition to the inside and the air brake test. We had to do all of it, the full walk around. So engine bay, engine block, the whole tractor, the whole trailer, all the tires, all the brakes, everything. They pulled no punches because they wanted to make sure we were good to go. But all of the examiners were hired by the school, so none of us had to go to a DMV to do our test. All of us did it in house, and thankfully I passed mine on the first try. But I had some of my classmates that didn't, and probably for the better, because one of them, he didn't speak English very well and he couldn't be helped. And he was an older guy too, and you know how that goes. Sometimes you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Most of the time you can if you work at it hard enough, but sometimes you can't. And after okay, so at the beginning of my second week of CDL school, you're gonna love this. I got on that Sunday, before it was Monday to Friday, 5-day program, for 3 weeks. On that Saturday night going into Sunday, my wife and I, then fiance, went to the hospital because the baby wasn't moving much in her stomach or in her belly, and we just wanted to get it checked out. And as we're at the hospital, her water breaks and she starts going into labor. So fast forward to Sunday morning, my daughter is born by C-section, and I have to make a phone call to one of my buddies in the school saying, "Hey man, I just had a daughter and I'm not going to be at school on Monday." And thankfully they still credited me with the hours, so shout out to TDI in Sanford. But that was a really wild thing because as soon as I came in on Tuesday, we were on the road and we were taking rides. We would switch off on lunch. So one crew would go out in the morning with the instructors on the road, and the rest would stay on the yard to do maneuvers. And then you'd flip flop that at lunch. And that was the last 2 weeks up until Thursday and Friday when they did tests. And it was the same test that you did. They tested you on the maneuvers, on the pre-trip, and then a road test. And the guy who did my road test, he was an old retired Army Ranger, old school Army Ranger, served in the regiment. So one of the things he said to me that's stuck with me all these years is that, yeah, I got paid to kill people, and now I teach people how to drive trucks.
Which the two you can sometimes relate the two.
Yeah, yeah. Every now and then it comes up, especially when you get these four-wheelers. I call them squirrels when they jump in front of you. Because I just went through
Mhm.
Chicago twice today, and it was not fun. I mean, I tell you what, I went through there at 9 a.m. and then I came back out around lunchtime in Chicago, and I'll be a happy man if I never got to go to Chicago again.
Yeah. Have you been through New York City yet?
I haven't been through New York City, but I've been through New England, and it's not much better.
Yeah, no, yeah, New England blows, but New York City compared to Chicago, like worlds apart. Even though Chicago's nothing, easy. Yeah, but
Mm,
New York City just has a lot more low overpasses. There's a lot more expressways you can't get on. There's
yeah,
parkways, like the Sawmill Parkway you can't get on. There's trucks that'll always
yeah.
it gets a little bit dicier, but
And
that's
there's
it.
signs everywhere telling you not to get on the parkways.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, Chicago's a little bit easier than that. So that's good. Your CDL school seemed to have a lot of good instructors. You went
Yeah,
an unconventional route. You paid for it yourself, which doesn't kind of behold you to a company. You had a
yeah,
kid during CDL school. I think that's
yeah, yeah.
actually that's pretty wild. There was a kid in my CDL class who he ended up getting locked up like halfway
Mm,
through. I think he violated some sort of one of his ex baby moms or something, like called the police on him to try to say that, I don't know, he violated some or some protection order or something like
mm,
that. I don't know. He seemed like a good guy to me. I don't. He seemed to be trying to put his best foot forward, but all of a sudden he didn't come back, and I was told, yeah, I think he's in the clink real quick. So things will
yeah.
happen.
So anyway, moving on from CDL school, about the same time, I want to say 3 or 4 days after my daughter was born, and I was on the yard doing maneuvers. I got I called into Keenan to CAG to just make sure everything was lined up for me to start working after I was done with CDL school. And the lady I spoke to, she's like, "Hey, you don't have any experience and you're under 21, so we can't hire you." And that was kind of like a kick in the gut because I had been assured by these senior drivers that it wouldn't be an issue. You know, I'm 20 years old. I'm getting my CDL. I'm going to have my tanker endorsement. Funny enough, I never went and got my hazmat. I've gone the past year and a half of driving without hazmat, and it's hasn't been an issue. But anyway, getting back on track. Let me gather my thoughts here. So Keenan told me that they couldn't hire me under 21, no experience. They wanted a year of experience and over 21. Okay, that's fair enough. I just wish people had been a little more straight up with me before I went to CDL school and quit my security job.
Yeah, it might have been like that when they had started
Yeah,
at CAG. That could have happened.
yeah,
Real quick before you continue, I'm just curious on this
right.
with schools, just because I know every school is different. Did they allow you to get your CDL with driving a manual, or did they only offer you automatic?
So they did offer manual, and what's funny is that I'm automatic restricted. I did mine only on automatic, just because I realized that the industry as a whole is shifting almost entirely towards automatic trucks, and that's just the way it's going to be. And I know I wouldn't really have an issue with what I was going for. I'm not interested in the heavy haul. I'm not interested in any of that. I just want to make enough to make ends meet and just get through life. That's all I'm interested in. So about a week after I got into CDL school, they jacked up the price to learn manual. It was an additional 1,000 on top of the 6,000 you're already paying.
Okay, so this is something I haven't heard before. So, and look, I mean, no offense to anybody who gets their CDL with an automatic restriction. I mean, it's, my opinions on it. I just think it offers better training for control of the vehicle itself. But I
Yes.
mean, I'm not going to ever insult somebody's, for taking that option. But now this is something I'd love to look more into, that schools are now. So they separate it now to where if you wanted the manual, you had to pay more
That
going
was
to
that
see.
school.
That was that
Now,
school specifically.
I
But
don't know
this,
if all schools are doing that, but when I was there, because initially they asked me like, "Hey, do you want to do automatic or manual?" And I asked for automatic, and they never mentioned an additional charge for manual if I wanted to go that route. And they said I could change my mind at any time during the program and go learn manual. But then, as the class came in behind us, as we were a week ahead and the class a week behind us came in, they were saying, "Yeah, I had to pay an additional 1,000 to learn manual."
yeah,
And that was kind of weird to me because I was like, that doesn't make any sense. You got this old beat up Freightliner with a 10-speed in it. Why are you going to charge extra to learn in it? You know?
mhm. It,
So
it, I'd love to do a deep dive into that. I'm gonna have to do some research, but enough of that. So CAG lets you down. You didn't have
yeah.
experience. Where do you go from here?
So I was still under 21. I got out in November, so I went in November 1st and got my, I guess, graduated on November 19th. And anybody who goes to TDI in Sanford, if you look on the shelter that's on the right side of the yard closest to the building, if you look up, I signed it. Everybody signed it who graduated there. Signed the shelter outside and the podium inside, and I signed mine Xbox. And you can see it if they still have that shelter up out there. But that's a little off track. So CAG let me down, and I was going to be under 21 until February. So about the same day I picked up my CDL from the DMV, my father relapsed on alcohol. He's alcoholic, drug addict, all that, and he relapsed on alcohol. And my wife, having just given birth, and my newborn and we had to leave the house, and we went to stay with my grandmother for a little while. So think of all this as adding up on a 20-year-old. Just got a CDL, figured out that I'm out of a job, just had a kid, and my wife is reeling from a C-section that she had complications from. And on top of all that, my dad's relapsing, and we got to get out of the house. So
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to worry about that manual restriction.
right.
You had a lot going on to be worried
Right.
about floating. I give you a lot. I give you a lot of credit, man. That's a lot. I commend you for that.
So, and I'll get into that a little bit later about how we made it through that. But we go and stay with my grandma for a few weeks. Thankfully, she had a spare room in her apartment for us to stay in while we got on our feet. And while we were looking for a place of our own to stay there in Castleberry, I went back to Walmart to work as an overnight stalker. And it was a little bittersweet. Like, hey, you left without notice, and now you're coming back. What's going on here? But And the reason I didn't go back to working at security is because they didn't have an open slot for me. Otherwise, I would have just gone right back to working at security. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I ended up leaving Walmart again because I had differences with the manager and just did DoorDash pretty much in my little 96 Corolla. And ran around Sanford, Oviedo, Castleberry, that whole area, and just did DoorDash around there to kind of pay the bills. And we had some help from my father-in-law and from my parents and from my grandparents. God bless them all. And then finally in February, when I turned 21, I had been talking to Schneider, the bulk division, because I wanted to drive tanker. I had my tanker endorsement. I didn't have hazmat, but I was willing to get it if they wanted me to. But I found this ticket. It was some kind of dedicated account hauling herbicide for Bayer Monsanto. I don't know if you heard of them.
Yeah, Monsanto. Yeah. They're the guys who poison our food.
Yeah, I learned about that after I left the tanker division. But I found this this dedicated ticket with Schneider hauling that stuff out of Muscatine, Iowa. And, it was pretty much, besides going into dry van and being treated like shit, because I saw better reviews about Schneider's bulk division than I did about dry van division. And I'll get into that a little bit later as well.
I've heard this. I've heard the same, that hauling tanker with Schneider's different.
Tanker is a lot more tightly run. It's a very tight ship. And you have a lot more dedicated and experienced drivers teaching new drivers. The trainers in bulk, it was a 5-week training program. So I turned 21 on February 19th. They flew me up to Pennsylvania on February 27th to begin that 5-week training program. And there I basically relearned how to drive a truck. They had half full tankers full of, glycol water so it wouldn't freeze in the winter. And if you know anything about tanker, that's the worst spot to be in is with a half full tank, because you have the most slosh, the most surge. Mm-hmm. So that was a 5-week program. I spent 4 weeks in Pennsylvania and my last week in Gary, Indiana. That's a shithole. But I spent my last week in Gary, Indiana.
You can hear the gunshots.
Oh yeah, man. And that was where I got specialized training for the Bayer Monsanto account. And weirdly enough, this whole tanker account was non-hazmat. Schneider does a lot of hazmat tanker, but oddly enough, herbicide is not registered as hazmat. I think it should be. I think it's an environmental hazard, and a health hazard. But anyway, I did that for about 3 months. It was 4 weeks out, full week home. It was like, I want to say 8 or 9 days home. It wasn't too bad, but when you got a newborn, you can't handle that. Being gone for so long, you miss so much, and by that point we had our own apartment in Castleberry, and my wife she couldn't handle it. So just before I left the tanker account, we moved up to where we now live in Cookeville, Tennessee, because my grandma was buying some property up there and wanted us to come up and help her put it all together and help her make the payments on it. Eventually it would be in our name once she passed. So I did another month with the tanker account. So that was 3 months total with the tanker account before I decided, like, hey, I need to make a change here because I'm going to miss a whole lot of my daughter's life. And also, eventually one of these days, I'm going to kill myself going around one of these curves with a half-empty tanker.
It is dangerous.
It gets really hairy, especially in inclement weather. I had a guy that I went to orientation with in Gary. He got stuck going uphill with his tires sliding in Minnesota and on a frozen road with a tanker. And he barely made it up to the top of the hill and pulled his brakes. And he camped out there until the sun came out. But anyway, so I started in February, got on the road in mid-March, early April. And by July, we had moved up, June. Yeah, early June, we had moved up to Tennessee. And I saw Schneider posting for a dedicated Walmart account out of London, Kentucky, which is about 2 hours from me. Home every 6 days, 6 days out, 2 days home. And, they told me that the pay was going to be roughly the same, but, it'll be a running theme with Schneider. It wasn't. I was on fixed pay on the tanker account. So no matter how much I worked, how little I worked, I got the same amount. I think it was $1,500 a week. But the thing with Schneider is they have some pretty expensive benefits, especially the package that I selected for my family. It was fairly expensive. So I only walked away with $900 or so of that per week. And that's hard, especially when you got my kind of bills and my kind of debt, because we had to go into a lot of debt to make it through that stint where I wasn't working too much. But anyway, I went to the Walmart account in early June. And if you know anything about June in Kentucky, it's hotter than devil's asshole down there. I mean, it was horrible. I was driving at night, and they put me in this piece of crap 20. I want to say it was 2014, 2016 Freightliner. It's got 700,000 miles on it. Still got an automatic in it, weirdly enough, but thing barely holds itself together, and now you're taking it down the back roads of Eastern Kentucky, Western Virginia, and trying to get to these little Walmarts in the middle of the night. And that's where I had some of my hairiest moments. Through all my time of driving tanker and driving since I left Schneider, some of my hairiest moments were on that Walmart account just because of the roads I was on.
Oh hell yeah, man! I know exactly where you're at.
Yeah.
I was on a Walmart dedicated account out of Seymour, Indiana, and I got to ride through parts of Eastern Kentucky. And yeah, people and I get it. People always say, well, the mountains out west, and they talk about the Rockies and Donner Pass, but the Smoky Mountains still just with there's spots in Tennessee you can't go down the Dragon's Tail. You can't go. There's dicey spots in Appalachia.
Oh, yeah.
People doubt.
Oh yeah, I mean Appalachia is nothing to mess around with, and I learned that pretty quick. They only had me out with a mentor for 3 nights, because it was a night driving reefer account, and it was like multi-drop, that kind of stuff at different Walmarts. And so here I am. Just picture this. Here I am. I'm in the middle of Appalachia, and it's about 3 a.m, and I'm standing outside of the back of a poorly lit Walmart, waiting for these people to open the door up for me. I'm looking over my back, for the normal characters that are at Walmart, and also the stuff that lurks in the mountains. But no, I did that until August of 2022. Yeah, 2022. And I started looking around. I hit my 6 month of driving mark. 3 months on tanker, 3 months with the dry van division. And once I hit my 6 month mark, I started looking around, and Averitt Express, they had a dedicated account out of Cookeville, where I live. It was 15 minutes from my front door. I wouldn't have to commute 2.5 hours every week anymore. And it was the same home every weekend, and the pay was a little better. It was 51 cents a mile as opposed to like 47 cents a mile that I was getting at Schneider. And it was real miles too. That was about, even though I was home every weekend, I was still pushing 3,000 miles a week on that dedicated account. It was a good account. And the only reason I stepped away from that is because at the end of the year, the work dried up. The customer wasn't moving as much freight, and the other division of Averitt, the truckload division that wasn't dedicated, they had soaked up all the spot freight that Averitt was hauling. So there wasn't really much for us on the dedicated side to do. So I saw a posting on Averitt for a yard jockey position in Smyrna, Tennessee, at the Nissan plant, where you're just shuffling trailers from door to yard or door to door or whatever. So I said, you know what, whatever, I'll do it. It was about an hour and a half commute every day. It was difficult, especially a lot of wear and tear on my little old Corolla. But that thing's held strong with me through the years, man. I'll tell you what, the little 96, that's a great car. I do all the work on it myself. I mean, I was just listening to your second podcast where you're like, yeah, I'm not a gear jockey. I'm not a gearhead, nothing like that. I'm a total gearhead, dude. I know how to do pretty much everything on that car except the like deep mechanical stuff in the engine. But that's a little off track. So I did the yard jockey thing for another 3 months, and I started watching Smart Trucking on YouTube. I don't know if you've seen him.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good guy. I like what he has to say, and he's what got me interested in the freight sphere. Not just driving the truck, not just dealing with the customers, but actually getting into what causes the problems that we have, like the parking issues and the pay issues and the detention issues and the lumpers and all that kind of stuff. And that's what started getting me interested. And he started putting ads out for GP Transco, who I'm with right now. I mean, I got my cup right here. But so I put in my notice with Averitt. Probably the biggest mistake I ever made was leaving Averitt. I'm going to be completely honest with you. They're a really good outfit to work for. I'm not a recruiter. I'm not paid by them. I don't have any affiliation with them anymore, but I recommend them to anybody. If you got 6 or more months of experience, put an application in. They're backed up right now, but you can get through. But anyways, that's off track. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. We're fans of Averitt on the show. They just recently had a gentleman go on, my friend Dooner's show at What the Truck, which is one of FreightWaves' popular podcasts. And he went on there. And like I said, Averitt's a company that advertises that you won't have to worry about parking if you drive for them. Right. They seem driver focused. Their turnover rate. Yeah, he's mentioned the turnover rate and the pay. That's the thing. The Averitt's doing. Yeah. They're doing what carriers should be doing for the most part.
Let me tell you this, Averitt, I don't usually like Freightliners. I do not like the Freightliner I'm in right now. The company I'm going to here pretty soon is going to put me in a Volvo. But I will say Averett's Freightliners are decked out. I mean, I don't know if you've seen them. In the back, they got a picnic table and there's 2 seats in the back, and you can fold all that down and your bunk comes down. So you don't lose the top bunk if you want to use that. And they got tri-pack APUs on them, so you don't got to sit there and idle your truck all night if you want power. And those are the 2 things that I miss most about not driving for Averett is having that table. Because right now I'm on a little card table thing here on the bunk of my truck. And if I was still with Averett, I'd be on a little table that's actually built into the back of the truck instead of having to jerry rig something.
Averett had the Volvos?
No. Averett has the Freightliners.
Oh, okay.
And they deck them out on the inside, man. They're nice. They don't have like the digital dash and all that stuff, which my truck has that right now. I don't particularly like it. It's kind of finicky. I'm sure it's for some people, like the more tech heavy people, but it's not my thing.
But you said you got off track. You didn't. This actually is related to your 96 Corolla. And that's why people have, I've talked about on previous episodes where a lot of these newer trucks, they're very neutered. They're teched out. They're beaten down with all these different electrical parts and all this stuff that goes to that screen. Like you yourself, if you say, for example, if you're a new owner operator and you go and buy a 2022, 2023 Cascadia, it's very difficult for you to do your own work on it. However, whereas I know my friends over at Blue Ribbon Logistics, they're a capacity trucking company who's contracted with Landstar. They don't buy trucks newer than like 2007. And that's how they're able to, I mean, based off their P&L, their profit and loss statements, that's how they, make so much, are able to make a decent amount of money, is because of them doing their repairs. It's what's called planned obsolescence. This stuff is being built to break. Your 96 Corolla, that thing's a dog for you.
Oh yeah.
So you can go to war with that car. You don't have to worry about it. Whereas cars today, they got computers, one thing goes wrong on a newer car. I think new cars today are the most worthless they've ever been. And they're all fiberglass and they all break. One little ding on it. The trucks today, pickup trucks, who's using a pickup truck for the utility anymore? It's
a statement.
Luxury SUVs for men. That's all they've become.
That's a statement. That's all it is now. And I'm glad you touched on that, because I feel like a lot of the issues, and I have a story about a brand new Freightliner that I drove. Don't let me forget about it. But I want to touch on the breakdown issues that modern trucks, especially Freightliners, have, is related to the emission systems. The first truck I drove for GP Transco, I drove it for a week, and the DPF went bad, and I had to turn it back in, and they had to send it back to Freightliner. And it's just one of those things where it's like,
it's probably still there.
It's probably still there. Because I've heard so many stories from drivers and on YouTube and all that of emission systems putting trucks out of commission because, the EGR went bad, or the DPF went bad, or the DEF system went out, or something. It's one thing with the emissions, and it puts it in limp mode, and it won't go over like 5 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour.
The scariest part about that, and this is what I will never understand, is now if you buy a Dodge Ram, because they all have DPF systems in them now, like all the newer pickup trucks, or even a box truck. Friend of mine, actually, you're from Central Florida, good friend of the show, the owner and operator of Holidays Pressure Washing. Shout out. He lives in Longwood, not far from where you were at.
I know where that is.
He had a box truck that would have, and when he would run out of DEF, it would derate him, but only to 55. It would never derate him to 5 miles per hour, but semi trucks will eventually derate you to 5 miles per hour. And how that is considered, how that is legal for that.
You're a hazard.
Yeah.
At that point.
It'd be because, to force you to tow to get to a mechanic or to get it fixed is wildly insane. It's anti-small business, because what kind of small one truck owner operator can afford tow bills, because because without the DPF system, the truck still works.
Oh yeah.
And it actually is more fuel efficient. It doesn't beat the engine down, so it can still work. And I know that the argument is like, well, owner operators wouldn't fix it. They wouldn't go get it fixed they would just drive at 55. I doubt that. I think that's just that's.
I feel like owner operators are more interested in making money.
Yeah,
and
they're not
55 isn't going to make you any money.
Yeah, they're not going to make any money. But
unless you're in California.
So the Cascadias at GP Transcos are not making. You had an issue with the DPF there.
Yeah, the first Freightliner that I was in, it was a 2022, pretty new truck. and the DPF went out, and it didn't derate the truck though. I was still able to go my full governed speed of 66 on cruise, 63 on pedal, which is weird. I don't know why and we have temporary passing speed. If I double tap my accelerator pedal, it'll let me go 70 for 15 minutes out of the day. Yeah,
That's brand new. I never heard of that.
it's called Pass Smart. It's a Freightliner thing.
Wow.
Yeah, I think Maverick Transport has that too. I heard you talking about Maverick on your first episode or your second episode.
Yeah, they're where I would have started if I could have passed the air test, but I was
the follicle.
too fresh off the weed to
Yeah.
have passed to have risked the hair follicle test.
But yeah, 2022 Freightliner DPF went out, so I took it back. They sent it back to Freightliner, and they put me in this one now. It's a 2023, and it's pretty nice. It'll shit and get, and I haven't had any issues with it, except for the one issue that I put on my TikTok about my fuel pump has got a little bit of fuel coming out of the fitting, but I tightened that up, and it's not leaking anymore, so we're good on that front. But that brand new Freightliner story that I was telling you about. So after I got out of tanker training with Schneider, they put me in a brand new 2023 Freightliner, a year ahead of its model year. It's 2022. They put me in 2023. That's how car model years go, I guess. And it had 20 miles on it when I got into it. It was a Cadillac, man. I mean, it was nice. At least, a fresh driver coming out of CDL school, and I get put in a brand new tractor pulling a tanker trailer. I mean, I'm going to love it. So they put me on my first run. I got to go to Muscatine, Iowa, pick up a load that's going to Kansas. So I get down to Muscatine, Iowa, and the little trim piece on the Freightliners, the new ones that likes to fall off?
Mm-hmm.
That came off of the mirror before I even got to Muscatine, not even 600 miles in. So I got to Muscatine, picked up my load, and got down to Kansas and made my 2 deliveries. And I was sitting out of Lowe's waiting for my next load to come through. And, I had been idling the truck because it had the optimized idle. I don't know if you've heard anything about that, but I think it's an absolute trash way to handle running your inverter and running your climate control and all that while the truck is not on. Because with the Freightliners, I don't know about any other brand because I haven't used them, but with the Freightliners, you have to leave your key in the on position, and you hit a little button, and optimized idle comes on, and it cuts the engine off. But when it needs to charge the batteries or do a regen, it'll cut the engine on and disturb everyone around you because your engine's running. And God forbid it has to do a regen because it's going to be louder than hell and wake you up. And the first night I spent in that truck, it woke me up because it kicked on. Because it was a warm, I want to say it was a cold night, and I was running my heater, and the truck kicked on and woke me up. I was like, "What the fuck? Who just got into my truck?"
Yeah, my truck, you could flip a switch to where if it needed to charge the batteries, it will turn the engine on, but it wouldn't do it for a regen. It wouldn't do it for a regen. That's something that's pretty new.
The Freightliners, they regen while they're charging the batteries. It's not 2 separate cycles. It just merges it into the charging cycle. I really dislike it. I think it's a really poor and inefficient way to do it. If you're a company with a lot of resources like GP Transco or Averitt or Schneider, you need to be putting diesel APUs on your trucks because it's a little more upfront expense on buying the truck, but with how volatile fuel prices are, you're going to make that back in fuel because when that diesel engine is idling, it burns about 1 gallon per hour, right? And a diesel APU like a tri-pack or a carrier is going to burn 0.1 gallons per hour. So already within 6 months or a year, you can make your money back in fuel.
Yeah, it pays in dividends because you're also looking at the life of the engine at that point.
Oh, yeah. Idling is so bad for a diesel engine. Diesel engines want to be abused. I mean, it's like that one clingy ex. They love being abused, and they don't like idling. They hate it, and it clogs your DPF up too. That's why it's got to regen so often.
Yeah, they were meant to literally go up mountains with 40,000 pounds of equipment on it. Yeah, they're not meant to just sit still, and just
it's
sit
like,
there.
What are you doing here? I feel cramped up. Let's go, man. So I will always, speak out against optimized idle because it's not really optimized. It's really bad for the truck in the long haul. Now, I will hand it to them. Companies like Nussbaum, I don't know if you've seen them, and GP Transco, they're putting solar panels on the big ass fiberglass foreheads of these Freightliners. And, I could see it if you're a night driver and you're parked a lot during the day. But if you're a day driver and you're parked a lot during the night, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because the sun's not up at night. And what's it really doing? That's when the truck idles, is at night. So, I mean, But I also understand it. Perfect example, when I got into this truck, the batteries were flat dead. When the detailers came through, they had left the lights on and didn't cut the batteries off. So truck was flat dead, 8.4 volts. I mean, it was almost unrecoverable. They had to bring out two jump packs to bring the bitch up back to life. But in that scenario, it would have kept the batteries charged and the thing wouldn't have been dead when I got into it. And for a night driver, I could see it. But outside of that, really the way to go is APUs. I'm always going to say that.
Yeah, no, from a business perspective, that's definitely the way to go. So let's see. So, but you're at GP Transco now. You've
Yeah.
mentioned you're going to part ways with them. So what?
Right.
Yeah. So where are you headed from here?
So it's a company called First Express. I don't know if you've seen them around. I think they're a smaller outfit out of Nashville. But what's interesting about them is that they used to be associated with Averitt. Back in, I want to say 98, Gary Sasser, the owner of Averitt, and the owner of First Express, I don't remember his name, they were in a business partnership, and Averitt and First Express were essentially sister companies. Gary Sasser helped the owner of First Express get his startup capital together and start his own outfit, and they parted ways in, I want to say, 02 or 03. But First Express still parks at Averitt terminals, and they pay them a monthly fee to do that. So for me, I'm going to First Express because they can get me home every weekend as opposed to being out 3 weeks at a time with GP Transco. And they have, carrier APUs on their trucks, and I'm going to be parking at the same terminal that I was parking at with Averitt. It's 15 minutes from my house. So it really all just works out in my favor, and the benefits are less expensive too.
Oh, so First Express, and this is I'm glad you brought this up. So they're currently hiring, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Whereas now Averitt, I believe, is hiring too, but like any good company right now, any good carrier, anything with good lanes, a lot of that's drying up. Like there's not a lot of, obviously we still have companies and politicians, and there's articles talking about a driver shortage narrative. We've debunked it on this show time and time again. I went on national news debunking this. So it's obviously true. But when it comes to companies like Averitt now, so that's the thing is you said you regretted leaving Averitt, but you can't go back there because the job's not open.
Well, the thing is, the jobs are open. Averitt is still hiring. But the thing is, the truckload division of Averitt, I don't know if you heard about, well, yeah, I've heard you talk about it. Yellow went kaput. And Averitt does a lot of LTL freight. So a lot of Yellow drivers are going to Averitt because Averitt does a LTL just like Yellow did. So what's happening is that Averitt's still hiring, but there's like a 2-month backlog on getting into orientation because they're only limited to a certain amount of people they can take in every week.
Yeah, and you need to get off from OTR now. Okay, that makes sense.
So First Express and my connection that I'm going to call him a recruiter. My recruiter at First Express, he was telling me that First Express is actively avoiding former Yellow drivers because they're used to being local. They're not used to finding somewhere to park every night or sleeping at a shipper or what have you, because most Yellow guys were home every night.
Yeah, well, some were OTR. I had a Yellow driver come on the show. There were Yellow drivers. It wasn't all the time, and it's not most of them, but he would technically do OTR. But I think based off the collective bargaining agreement, he couldn't be away from home for more than 3 or 4 days, and they would stay at hotels, and that would be set up for him. But that makes it makes sense why they'd avoid hiring some Yellow drivers, because Averitt obviously can't offer as much home every night.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, even when I was working for Averitt, you were hard pressed to find a local position with Averitt. Averitt has some of the lowest turnover in the industry with their local drivers, because not only do their drivers get paid extremely well to be local, they're close to home and they're home every night. And the only reason you're going to lose a local driver is if he, God forbid, gets hurt and can't work anymore, or if he retires. I mean, that's really it. So, but yeah, First Express, they seem like a good outfit so far. Obviously I'm going to keep the line open here with GP Transco in case things go sideways. But I'm
saying I'm on First Express's website here now, and the first thing they say, home weekend since 1994.
Yeah, they've always done that. They're not an OTR company like a GP Transco is trying to be, and they're not outstretching their boundaries, and that's something I really commend Averitt and First Express for. They know their boundaries. So Averitt has even though they're a much larger carrier than someone like GP Transco or another OTR company, Averitt knows their footprint. They don't go much further west than Texas, and they don't go much further north than Pennsylvania most of the time.
if those companies are gonna grow, they have to grow in the sustainable. They're only gonna
Right.
grow if it's as sustainable as what they're offering here. And yeah,
Right.
that and I'm looking at this now. The top drivers are making 90,000. If you get
Yeah.
hazmat, you increase your pay.
Yep.
You get a compensation review every 4 months. Monthly safety bonuses, automatic raise every 50,000
Yeah.
miles.
Every 50,000
That's
miles is a half cent per mile raise.
yeah, that's you really
It sounds like a
that,
good package.
yeah,
So,
that's a solid outfit. But yeah, always leave the door open at GP Transco. I mean,
oh yeah,
even
I've
though
done
I've
that every time. Every
if
time I've left the carrier, I've left the door open just in case.
yeah, and I've badmouthed Pam Transport on this show, but if I applied tomorrow, they wouldn't probably say no because they probably don't listen to this show.
And
Which
I mean,
actually they might, but who knows?
none of what I've said is to badmouth GP Transco. I mean, if you're a single guy and you're out here to do 3,000 miles a week and really put the miles down, GP Transco is the company's for you. If you have a year of experience and you don't mind being out 3, 4, 5 weeks at a time, depending on where you live, the closer you are to Joliet, Illinois, the more often you'll be home.
Yeah.
But if you don't mind being out for extended periods of time, like I know a woman who lives in Florida. She parks her truck at the terminal in Joliet and flies home for 4 or 5 days and comes back, and she does 4 or 5 weeks on the road.
Yeah.
And but she's single. She doesn't have any kids. Her kids are grown up. They moved out. I want to say if she had a husband, she divorced him, or they're separated in some way or another. And she lives out on the road and she makes fantastic money because that's what she can do. But for me, I'd like to be involved in my child and my wife's life.
Yeah, and that's not a tall order to really ask for. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's good, man. I'm glad you're getting yourself to a good outfit. I do want to touch on what we were talking about off the
yeah,
phone though with GP Transco because I don't
right.
know if a lot of people know this. Now, I know that it was started. All I knew is that it was started by a Lithuanian gentleman out of here. But what I didn't know is that GP Transco isn't just a trucking company; they're also a tech company,
Yes.
and they have a TMS software that
Yeah,
they've created.
yeah, it's called Open Road TMS. They're the proprietor of it and they sell it to other trucking companies. It's basically just a phone app that the driver puts on his phone or on his ELD tablet, depending on what he has. And all your dispatches come through that. It'll tell you the miles that you're getting paid for, the deadhead miles that you still get paid for, and it has monthly and weekly reviews and all that. I like it because you can do everything within there except for the ELD. Our ELD is through Samsara. But the Open Road you can turn in your proof of delivery, you can accept or reject loads, you can do your performance reviews on that. It'll show you how much you've made in mileage and in pay for the week, and as a gross review for the whole year. And I think it's a good way to go. And I just wish they were a little more friendly to Trucker Path.
Okay, you're saying you wish GP Transco was or Open Road
Yeah,
TMS?
both, because GP Transco, they use a GPS called Copilot, and I've been using Trucker Path for the longest time since I started driving. And I really like it because it's really similar to Google Maps, but it gives you truck routes. That's why I like it. And I can just flick around, see what parking looks like at different truck stops and all that. And I like it so much, I pay for it out of my own pocket. It's $10 a month. It's not bad. And I asked them during orientation, like, hey, why don't you partner with Trucker Path and integrate your routes into there so that I don't need to search up this address. I can just punch a button in Open Roads and it comes up on Trucker Path. And the reason being, apparently, the coding language they wrote for Open Road doesn't mesh well with Trucker Path's coding language, but it meshes better with Copilot. But I really don't like Copilot, so what I do is I just look up the address in my Trucker Path and do it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking this up. It looks like Open Road costs $225 a month, includes all access features, but it gives a lot because I know I would use TransFlow to send up my bills. So you don't use TransFlow at all to
First
send up your
Express does.
bills. First Express will use TransFlow, but GP
Yeah,
Transco, you'll
yeah.
send your bills up through Open Road TMS.
Yep,
But so
and they do want the paper bills back. So if I'm in the terminal, I'll turn them in, or we have trip packs.
it's odd to see that GP Transco will not buy APUs, yet they're making millions off of Open Road TMS.
It's
It's
weird,
funny.
isn't it?
Yeah. Now,
I think the whole thing is they're trying to be a progressive tech company and a trucking company.
yeah, there's a lot of that going on in this industry. Actually, friend of the show, Reed, part of our Please Advise gang, he has a software that he's created called Lost Freight, and he actually makes memes about this because there's a lot of brokerages.
Okay.
There's a lot of brokerages that love calling. if you go on a freight brokerage's website, they'll call themselves anything but a brokerage because they want to make themselves look like a startup tech companies and stuff like that. And I know LoadSmart is another company who's trying to go the way of GB Transco because they're trying to. A lot of these logistics companies, and that's another thing people like to say is they want to start a logistics company because it makes them sound, I don't know, it doesn't make them sound as proletariat. They want to sound more bourgeois. Yeah.
That lumper company I made that video about, they called themselves a logistics company.
Yeah, lumper companies will call it. Yeah, was it Capstone Logistics?
Yeah, it's Capstone.
Yeah, of course it was. Which that's even funnier. Like, why would they call themselves Capstone Logistics? Yeah, you think it sounds like a computer software company.
Yeah,
when it's because they don't want to call themselves Capstone Offloading Services, or
right.
or something like that. And they're not going to call themselves a lumper service.
They're not going to outright tell you that they're trying to screw you.
Yeah, and that's what's funny about that is you've learned that it's this archaic, part of the supply chain, so to speak, because they're a link in the chain. And I've had to on your video, I had a guy comment actually back on that saying, "I've never paid for a lumper with credit card. I've had to do that several times. Yeah. I've had to pay. I think I have email. I have receipts in my email of when I had to pay Capstone and." The thing is, owner operator small businesses, you got to pay that up front. And then the broker would reimburse. I never had an issue getting reimbursed. I did almost have an issue with Axle Logistics, who another brokerage made they burn in hell because I've
pulled a bunch of their loads
of Axle Logistics. Yeah, they're pieces of shit. And I have no remorse saying that because I had plenty of conversations with their brokers negotiating outright liars, younger kids. Or whatever. And you said GP Transco is moving a lot of spot freight, but yeah, they tried that guy, his first reaction when I asked him, I was like, "Hey, I was at a grocery DC in Louisiana and I had to pay $250 or something." And I sent him an email and he said, and he just replied back, not in anything professional. He said, "Can you pay it and we'll get you back?" And it's like,
that's professional.
It was almost like he texted to me. He's like, "Can you just pay it and I'll get you back?" And I just responded, "Nope, they don't take credit card." And then he's like, and then he told me that I needed to call a number, make an account on this website, call this other guy. And I had to, and basically it took me another like hour and a half, 2 hours just to get the payment because this place couldn't take it. It is definitely a scam. I don't know why it is. It's just another, for some savings. Yeah, it's somehow is still a cost saving, but it's only at mainly these grocery DCs is where they have them a lot.
Yeah,
and a lot of them have to count everything.
Bro, I got in there at 9 p.m. My scheduled for an appointment unload at 9 p.m. So I figured, okay, they're expecting me to be there. This shouldn't take too long. I didn't get out of there until 3:45 in the morning.
Yeah, that's the problem is what people, and I've said it, we've said it a bunch of times on the show. We talk about it on LinkedIn, but the issue is when it comes to the lumper service, the motor carrier's job is to pick up product A and put it in their truck and bring it to a receiver. That's it. The carrier is paid to do that. The carrier's not paid to make sure that it's counted. Because if it's not counted correctly, because that's the thing, once that load is off the truck, if the count is wrong, then that's a dispute between the shipper and the receiver. The motor carrier didn't do anything. Half the time when you go to these shippers and receivers, they don't even let you seal the truck. They seal it themselves. They don't let you, they sometimes don't let you look in it. So I don't have a clue why. I mean, the thing is there's no incentive from either the shipper, receiver, and large carriers like GP Transco, as even though they're a decent company, they're not incentivized to tell their to help. Well, they're clearly running a lot of spot freight, but say it was a customer, even carriers are not incentivized to tell these people, "Hey, my drivers are sitting there waiting. You need to get them moving," because the shipper is going to be like, "Well, fine, we'll find another carrier." And then because that's the thing, because they'll always just find the cheapest one. It's definitely something that can be, I think the one way to fix you waiting for lumper services is by what that needs to happen is the removal of the overtime exemption for truckers by removing the FLSA exemption, because then it would light a fire and change certain stuff. But it's comical.
If they had to start paying me per hour once I step foot on their property, they would have a fire up under their ass to get me unloaded and as expedient of a fashion as possible. But even though I'm going to get detention from that, my detention doesn't start until after 2 hours of sitting there.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, exactly. And I think it should start after 90 minutes personally, because I understand there and not all loads are created equal when it comes
yeah,
to loading and unloading.
I
And
mean,
it's
90 minutes is, just slightly above average of what I usually get at a live load or a live unload.
mhm.
I've only had 2 instances where I've been there, 6 hours, and that was once in South Carolina, and then this last time in Minnesota.
Yeah, well, if you stayed at GP Transco long enough, those times will stack up more and more.
Oh yeah,
I can,
I I've just stopped counting the amount of money I've lost from live loading and unloading. I mean, it's horrible. And just getting back to what you were saying about expanding within your own footprint and being reasonable about what you can and can't do, instead of trying to be a broad 48 state, lower 48 OTR carrier like GP Transco is, and I'm sure they can make their money with that one way or another. But what Averett and what First Express is doing is a whole lot better in my opinion, because instead of trying to go all across the nation and do all this and that, they're focusing on building strong relationships with current customers and putting trailers on their property so that drivers don't have to sit and wait.
oh,
They can keep their trucks moving.
you're absolutely right. A good friend of the show. We're connected on LinkedIn. I'm trying to have him on soon. His name's Adam DeGroot. He's said it before. He said it to me. The future of trucking is driver centric.
Yeah.
Whether large carriers agree with it or not, whether brokers or whether um, you know other links of the chain think so or not, but that's exactly how it's going to have to be, because 5-6 years ago they were banking on the robots being here by now, and you
Yeah.
still have clowns over at LoadSmart who are banking on Kodiak, and they're banking on Kodiak Robotics to get these robots rolled out in 2024 and 2025, and they're going to be in for a rude awakening once that's going to end up not working out for
You know
them.
what? How about you take that robotic truck and you send them down I-40 going from North Carolina and Tennessee. You tell me how they do.
Yeah. I'm looking for, yeah. And, and even with it, and I don't really care much to talk about, because the electric truck debate doesn't take any jobs, but that's the thing, is when that robot truck, that's the thing. These robot trucks aren't going to be able to go down Donner Pass
Right.
in December and through the winter time. So how's it going to speed up the freight? It's currently unrealistic to
Have
try
you
and view
seen?
it.
You mentioned electric trucks, and that got some gears moving. Have you seen Edison Motors?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought him up. Chase Barber is definitely, we're huge Chase Barber respecters
Yeah.
on this show. He's gone on my friend Gord McGill's show, Voice of Gord, shout out. He did an episode with them. What Chase Barber is developing at Edison Motors is the valid and really only transition we can make
Oh yeah.
into trying to get ourselves off of using, oil and natural gas. He's got everything going on with his, remodified cat
Oh yeah.
generators.
Have you seen his production prototype that he's making?
Yeah, no, it's
It's
fascinating what he's
yeah,
doing.
and I really like what he's doing in making as few proprietary parts as possible and making 99% of the parts on the truck widely available at any parts store. I love that, because that's gonna really revitalize an owner operator spirit, especially for what he's doing it for, which is off highway heavy haul. That's gonna revitalize an owner operator spirit to go work, because they're not gonna have to shell out all this money on, if you break a windshield, well, now I got to order a windshield from Freightliner. No, you can walk into a parts store and get a pane of glass.
Exactly. That's what the crazy thing, that goes back to that planned obsolescence we were
Right,
talking
right.
about. And I actually learned this when I went to the trucking museum. If you ever have a chance, definitely stop by the Iowa 80 Trucking
I
Museum.
went in there.
Yeah,
I went
it's
in there.
okay. So it's really cool. And I learned after going there, and I was talking, but Chase Barber mentioned this because I learned it after I go to the truck museum, is during the Cold War, all these trucks were built no matter what the company was, they were all built more durable and better, specifically because of the Cold War, to where the
Yep.
parts were interchangeable, to where they were always widely available. And it wasn't really until it wasn't really until like the Reagan era, going into the late 80s and 90s, when you started seeing the truck companies kind of peel off and be like, no, we're doing our thing. We're doing our thing. We're doing our thing. And then they all
Right.
started and then everything started being built to break. And then, now we're in this, dog shit pile mess. Now we are where, one sensor costs $1,500.
Yeah, I mean,
But
one
yeah,
thing I will say, if I was to go out and be an owner operator, I wouldn't, because for right now, with the way freight is, I feel it's way too unstable for me to maintain a family on. But if I was to go out and be an owner operator right now, the first thing I would do is go back to school and get this automatic restriction taken off, and I'd buy me an old truck that was
Mhm.
pre-emissions. I don't mind the ELD. I don't have a problem with that, but I want something that's pre-emissions, because that is, in my opinion, the number one cause of breakdowns on newer trucks is emissions.
Yeah,
That's
no,
that's what I would do.
I posted on Twitter the other day. I think what Chase Barber's doing is good, but the thing is, if DPF technology got better, that's the thing. Is it's an imperfect. I understand it. I'm not sitting here saying that. I'll never sit here and say what we're putting out into the atmosphere isn't having effect to the climate, because
Right.
what if you put something unnatural into something, it's going to do something. And I know that volcanoes release emissions naturally. I get that for all that argument, but
That's a
and
whole
so
can of worms.
yeah, but it's old can of worms. I'm not getting into any climate change debates.
Right.
I think that there's stuff we're doing that's not good. Clearly putting more of what's not natural into the air isn't good. So the DPF system by design is good. It's putting nitrogen and other harmless parts that are part of the atmosphere back into the atmosphere. So it's like, but the technology itself, they're
It's
developing
imperfect.
it. It's imperfect, and they're not making it better
Right.
over the years. I think they've gotten better since like 2015, but like they're still, like you said, why should a 2023 truck at the cost of 250, a $250,000 shut down, after,
Because the DPF went out.
yeah, because the DPF with less than 50,000 miles. It's just
Yeah.
that to me is, how can
It's
you,
crazy.
how are you authorized? How are you allowed to sell something that costs as much as a house that's, that has such a failure rate like that?
And another
Doesn't
thing I
make
will
sense.
say is that GP Transco is selling their 2021 trucks once they hit. They're selling trucks once they hit 350,000 miles, because I don't know if you know this about Freightliners. After they get past like 325 or 350,000 miles, they go into a breakdown cycle. The shit starts breaking.
Yeah, that once the warranty's up and the
Yeah.
factory warranties are all up, yeah, it turns into a rolling downhill mess. That's for
Um,
sure.
I wanted to touch on something you mentioned earlier about investing in drivers with more training time, and how the future is going to be driver centric. And it reminded me of a story that I have from when I was a yard jockey on the Smyrna plant. When I went to be a yard jockey, I already had more than a year on the road. Between Schneider and Avery, I was already, I was still a rookie, but a seasoned rookie, if you will. So I already knew how to back a truck up. I knew how to drive and all that, and it wasn't really a challenge for me to be a yard jockey. The main thing was just getting used to getting in and out of the truck that often, because it was about, I'd move 55 trailers in a day and get in and out of that truck at least 120 times. Um, so it was hard on my body, but it reminded me of a lady I worked with, because you mentioned Werner putting out subpar drivers. And well, this lady that I worked with at the Smyrna plant, I won't mention her name out of respect, because she was genuinely a nice lady, but she just couldn't back up a truck to save her life, man. She did 3 months with Werner, on some, I want to say, I don't know what account she was on, but it was on a dedicated team account. And I don't know what happened in her 3 months where she never backed up, but I was only at the Nissan plant for 3 months, and I visually watched her get into 3 different backing accidents. And it just comes down, there's a language barrier there too. She didn't speak that much English, and that seems to be a running theme with drivers that get into a lot of accidents I've seen. And that's nothing racial. That's just what I've observed.
No,
Um,
they're called patterns. That's the
yeah,
thing. I would
yeah,
do the same thing if I moved to France tomorrow.
right.
I'd probably end up doing damage somewhere, because you're
Do you
in.
want to do you want a good
You're,
exercise in that? Let me tell you how I got my nickname Xbox. In trucking school, let's back up. When I was still in high school, I took an interest in a game called American Truck Simulator. And
now the Gen
yep,
Z's coming out in you.
yep. So it's a video game on Steam. I don't know if it's anywhere else, but you can get it on Steam, and it's exactly what the name implies. It's the American Truck Simulator, and right now they have from California all the way out to Colorado and Texas. You can go across all those states in any truck you please. However realistic you want it to be. I've seen guys, they got full rigs in their houses set up that look like big rigs. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, I've seen them on
Um,
TikTok.
it's impressive. I mean, at that point, man, just go get in the truck. But But I took an interest in that when I was about. It came out in 2015, and I started playing it in 2016 or 2017. And I play it with a little Xbox 360 controller. I have it because I bring my gaming laptop on the road with me. So this controller right here, this Xbox controller, is what I play American Truck Simulator on. And I told people at my school that, like, hey, and I was naturally good at backing when I went into school. I was showing other people how to back because I had already put in 300 or 400 hours in the simulator by the time I went to trucking school. So I already had like a basic idea of how to back the truck up. So I was nailing the straight back. I was doing pretty good on the 90, kind of rough on the offset, but I was doing good on the 90 and the straight back. And well, my buddy Big Country, he came up to me. Guess why they call him Big Country? Big old boy. But he came up to me. He's like, "Hey man, everybody's asking how you got so good at backing." And no, it wasn't him. Somebody asked me. I want to say it was our instructor Cowboy. Yep, our instructor Cowboy was like, "Who was that? I was barely touching the wheel during the straight back." I was like, "That was me." And I was like, "Yeah, I did all my training on a simulator at home on an Xbox controller." That's where it came from. That's why they started calling me Xbox. And that's been my CB handle ever since.
Oh, dude, I love that. That's actually it's kind of funny because seeing those videos and you're like one of the first people I've talked to is and I know, I mean, I've heard that, Prime Incorporated, and I'm not a fan of them whatsoever.
They go
I think
slow, man. I don't like
I,
them.
I think they're predatory in their lease purchase and stuff, and that's a whole other topic. But their school, from what I've heard, because I follow this young girl on TikTok who went through their school, and their school they have a simulator, and they seem to take their school seriously, but they do a lot of the simulator.
Yeah, Schneider's
And
the same way. And at their facility in Gary, they have a simulator there for Schneider.
yeah, so I mean, they're definitely not bad things. Obviously, I think the more practical application of getting out and doing the job is better. But hey, man, that's
You can teach somebody the absolute basics of how to not cut a corner too sharp in a simulator
exactly
and not risk the public.
that. Yeah,
I'm all for it.
it's not. Yeah, it's not even the
Obviously,
backing. It's the
yeah,
it's the off tracking of the actual
right.
trailer, making
Because
those turns.
that's where I really started to understand how to compensate for that off tracking because the simulator is very good at simulating it. So once I had that in my head, I hopped into the driver's seat of that old Freightliner Cascadia that TDI had, and I was the first one to drive out of my group. So I pulled out of the lot, and the instructor he looked impressed. I
That's
mean,
good,
he
man.
he had nothing but good stuff to say. I mean, I didn't hit anything. I still haven't hit anything. Knock on wood. A year and a half of driving, I only have one accident. I didn't even hit anybody else. This is a funny story. You're gonna laugh at me for this one. I was in Virginia on the Walmart account. It was my first week on the Walmart account. I think it was my fourth night, and I was in Abingdon, Virginia, at that Walmart, and I passed the entrance to the Walmart because of the crappy GPS that Schneider had given me, and I didn't have my trucker pass set up. And so I started freaking out. I was on US Highway 11, and I didn't realize that it loops back around to Interstate 81, and I could just come back around. So I started looking for places to turn around, and I saw this little road. It was by a storage place, and it went back into a residential area. So I turned down this road and tried to turn around in front of the storage place. And while I was doing that, I got too much of an angle on the trailer and pulled one of the fairings off the tractor. And
But probably the most common. That's how you know if that's how you can tell you can identify a Pam transport truck. They've all got that
don't
bent
forget
fairings in.
Don't forget Western Express. Do you see that a
West,
lot too?
yeah,
I call them felony
the,
expresses.
the the fairings bent in. Yeah,
Yeah. So bent in or gone. Also Universal, they're bad about that too. All their Peterbilts got bent bunk extenders. But in my whole flurry of emotions after I got into that situation, I forgot to put the truck back in neutral back in neutral when I shut it off and got out to check the damage out. So when I tried to crank the thing back on, it wouldn't do anything because it wasn't in neutral. So now I'm like, fuck, I just broke this truck. And I ended up having to call the sheriff's office to come block the highway off for me so I could back out. And that's the only accident on a public highway I've had, and it wasn't even DOT reportable.
technically not even an
It was an
accident.
incident.
So
It
yeah,
was an
just
incident. It's
small
on
incident.
it's on my MVR as an incident.
Yeah,
Non-DOT. It's nothing like that. So it's never gotten me. It's never refused me a job.
yeah, bingo.
Um, yeah, thank God. Um, but I don't remember where I was going with that. I was talking about something.
No, it was just your first accident. You had learned on the Xbox. I love that about the Xbox. It's a
Yeah.
good story. So for
Oh
anybody
yeah,
out there
but
listening,
yeah, go on Steam. It's not an expensive game. I think it's like $15 for the base game, and then each state you can get different states, and they're all DLCs. You got to pay a little bit extra for those. That's pretty standard. But all the additional trucks they put in are free. They have licensed trucks, so you can get a long nose Peterbilt. You can get a Volvo. They put the new Volvo in recently. You can go into that game and make the exact truck, the exact Freightliner I'm driving right now. And there's a big community of people who mod the game, who put uh, like skins and liveries from real companies in the game for the trucks. So you can go in, get the mod for GP Transco, put that skin on a Freightliner and spec it out the same way my truck is right now and drive the same truck I'm driving right now with the same trailer in a video game. And
man,
I think that's incredible.
I find it funnier than anything because I think it's hilarious. But I mean, hey,
Yeah,
that's
but
from a
what
recruiting standpoint.
oh yeah.
That's what's going to get the younger generation in here.
And what I was getting to with that, if you want a good exercise and culture shock, they have a game called Euro Truck Simulator, made by the same people. You go drive a truck in Europe, and let
That
me tell you,
that I might download.
yeah, the Euro Truck Simulator 2 is the good one, and I have that, and I keep trying to get into it, and I can't. I don't speak Italian, man. So I mean, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I try to stay out of the UK because they drive on the wrong side of the road. But if you want a culture shock, you go download that game and try to drive in the UK.
That one I might download. But hey, man, we've been ripping for a little over an hour now.
Yeah, man.
I got to sign off. I really appreciate you coming on. And what I would like to do is we'll do this again here.
Yes, of
But we
course.
should do like a 6-month check in, see how it's going. Because I would love to see how it's going at the new outfit, see hear about some of your new experiences, and
Yeah,
and see what's going on. Bring you back on. We'll shoot the shit.
of
And
course.
but man, I wish you well on for your next company. And I sent you the invite to our Discord. I know you don't
Yep.
you obviously, and I've recommended it too for people to not buy a truck and go into business now. But I mean, if it's something you're aspiring to do, you're on the road the right way, where you're learning and you're learning where, because that's the thing, a big problem in this industry. I mentioned Prime's lease purchase program
Yep.
is, there's no industry I've ever heard where you can't all of a sudden, when you're a plumbing apprentice, you can't start a plumbing business, basically.
Right. You were talking about that in your podcast.
My
Hello.
Siri just popped. Yeah, my Siri just
I
popped on
lost you
for
for a
some
second
reason.
there.
Yeah, yeah. So, oh well, I'm not cutting that out. But yeah, so like, it's just, so from my perspective, and I believe from a lot of the listeners' perspective of the show, seeing you like, and you're learning these things, you're getting involved with it. I mean, stay involved, because you're the type of driver that this industry needs. Somebody who's cognizant, somebody who's also takes care of themselves. You seem to advocate for yourself and the work-life balance that you want with your family. So, man, I commend you on your life experience. Hell of a story. You've been through a lot, and especially just at CDL school, man. I was nervous enough as it was CDL school, because I felt like my grandfather was watching me the whole time, and I just wanted to impress him.
Yeah.
You had a whole kid C-section, man. That's, everything with your father. I commend you on that enough. So we'll bring you back on. But before we sign off though, where can the people come find you? Where can they see your social media?
So the only one that I really want people looking at is my TikTok. That's tn.redneck, R3D and 3CK, redneck with threes instead of E's. I'm probably going to change that soon, but for right now, it's tn.redneck, and that's really all I want people looking at.
Mm-hmm. And I have some friends who has family, and they get back there every now and then, who live in Shelbyville, which I believe is not far from
Yeah,
where
that's right
you're
over
at.
there by Nashville.
So if you ever need any help in Tennessee, I know I can always help you out best I can. But once again, wish you the best of luck
All
on
right.
there. We'll bring you back on again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
man.
love to come back. I'd
Yes.
love to be a regular guest here. I love coming on podcast. This is the first podcast I've ever done. A little nervous at the beginning, but I'm really enjoying it so far. I'd love to be a regular guest here.
Hell yeah, man. I'd love to bring you back on. But dude, stay safe out there on your way to you're on your way to St. Cloud, Minnesota tomorrow. Keep
No,
the rubber
St. Paul.
St. Paul, Minnesota. Keep the rubber sign down, brother, and we'll talk to you soon.
Of course. See you later, man.
See you later. Thanks, guys, for listening. That's going to wrap up episode 95. Fantastic story from Brett. I'm not going to lie there that, you know, people always ask what the difference is between, the generations, and like people like my generation, millennials to Gen Xers to back to boomers. And, why is like, millennials are obviously having kids younger. And that's why a lot of, I guess that's where some of us feel like we haven't grown up yet, because I guess I would have grown up a lot sooner if I, if I ended up having a kid at 22. And so when life happens, I guess you got to make those quick decisions. And, Brett's a prime example of that. Something happened to his life. He had to make a big boy decision, and he did. And he took it head on, and, it's paying off in dividends for him, and his career's taken off. Appreciate you all listening once again. Wrapping up episode 95. You know where to find me, at Lombard Trucking everywhere. And with that, guys, we're back to the bench. Take care.